What is the longest time you have ever spent in the shower? Have you ever wondered why we tend to think very deeply about life and other things while in that environment of hot water in the shower and time just flies by? And I'll be honest, it's happened to me a few times where I've just stood there for a few minutes and I can't even remember. Wait, did I wash my face? Did I already finish washing? Wait, do I need to... Wait, what? I totally lost track of time, and I think maybe some of you can relate to that as well, and that's kind of what I want to talk about in today's episode. Now, you might be thinking, what has this got to do with English? And, okay, perhaps not too much, but I think it's going to be interesting because we're looking at shower thoughts today. This is an idea that I came across a few years ago, and I think it was somewhat popularized on Reddit and social media, where people would share kind of deep feelings or deep thoughts they were having, often when in the shower. And it's kind of stuff that you don't really think about, or maybe it's a new perspective on something in life. And in this episode, I'm going to break it up into two categories. I'm going to start by talking about some humorous, funny shower thoughts that might make you laugh or find amusing, maybe. At least I do anyway. And then I'm going to end the episode in the second half with some deeper, maybe more philosophical thoughts that I find interesting to think about. And I hope you do as well. And of course, while I'm talking, as I always do, here is the English Learning Connection. I will do my best to share some useful and relevant vocabulary on this topic. And, maybe there's also another way we can connect it to language learning. I suppose if you are in that frame of mind where your mind is empty, you're thinking very deeply about things, that's a very useful time for your brain to process what you've been learning. I think it's very important for all of us to have these moments in the day of no podcasts, even this one, I mean it. No distractions, no people, just some quiet time, and it's really healthy for the mind and it's good for learning as well. So that's kind of a side benefit. But anyway, let's get into the episode and let's see where this goes. This is the Level Up English podcast, the best place to come to level up and improve your English one day at a time. My name is Michael, your host and your teacher for the day. Let's get started. Okay, so I want to start by saying, admitting something. I have a confession to make, and it's a little bit embarrassing, and this is that this is the third time I have recorded this episode. This has literally never happened before. There's been a few times in the past, in the history of the podcast, where something went wrong and I had to record again, but this is the first time it's ever happened twice. So this is the third time I'm recording. In fact, I was so frustrated. I recorded an episode and for some reason something went wrong. There was an error in the recording and I didn't know until the end. I was so frustrated, I just gave up and I went outside. I went for a walk to clear my mind, perhaps. And now it is about 2 weeks later. So I feel good again. I feel happy. But on that day, 2 weeks ago, I was very annoyed. So I think I'll go out maybe later today and I'll do some research and see if I can get a new camera for this podcast, because I think that might be causing some of the problems. So very frustrating. Hopefully I can fix it. And hopefully, knock on wood, that means hopefully this episode will be fine. If you're listening to it, I guess that means it was fine. But yeah, anyway, back to the topic today. As I said at the beginning, we're talking about shower thoughts today. And yeah, I kind of explained it a bit already. You go in the shower and people tend to ruminate quite deeply about things. And the first word we can learn here is ruminate, this verb. Maybe from context is already obvious. To ruminate is to think deeply about something, to ruminate. And you might have deep ruminations about your life. You might be thinking about fantasy ideas, like something almost like sci-fi, something totally unrealistic. Just daydreaming, basically, right? Daydreaming. And I did a bit of research to try and find out why this happens. right? And I think there are a couple of reasons that I noted down here. One of them is, your surroundings. If you think about where you are, what's happening, in the shower, it's a warm, if you're using hot water anyway, it's a warm and comforting environment. It's familiar to you, so you're not anxious or stressed, right? It's very familiar. And it's a place of relaxation, in the shower or the bath. This is where you can relax and let your mind wander freely. Right? So I think that's one key element. It's all those things coming together to make it a relaxing environment where you're not worried and you don't have to think about other things. I think another key element, of course, is that it's free from distractions. Most of us will not have our phone in the shower. We're not going to be talking to people in the shower or with our laptops. That would be quite silly, I think. So for most of us, it's a distraction-free environment, and I think those are few and far between. That just means they're not common. Those are few and far between. Those environments are not common in modern life. So, of course, that's when all these thoughts and feelings start to arise, start to come up. I will say, however, that I'm a little bit of an exception. First of all, I don't know why, but in my flat where I live in Bangkok, there is no hot water. I don't know why. It's never worked. It's never been hot. And in the UK, this would be a big deal. But here, I don't really mind. The weather, the climate is hot anyway, so I kind of enjoy having a cold shower. But because of that, it's not exactly comfortable. I don't spend a lot of time in the shower, so I don't really ruminate much like I used to. And also, I invested many years ago in a waterproof shower speaker, so I can listen to podcasts in the shower. For some of you, this will be a bit weird, but I don't know, maybe you're a fan of podcasts if you listen to this one, so you totally get it. I just love listening to a podcast in the shower. It's just a nice way to be totally focused on the audio and doing kind of routine washing. I don't really have to use my brain in the shower, of course. So yeah, I guess maybe it's not the best idea if I want to ruminate, but yeah, I don't tend to think deeply in the shower, but I may be an outlier. I may be an exception, right? And I think maybe the final aspect of this is the fact that maybe the timing. Let's say the timing. So often when you're in the shower, it might be right before bed or after waking up. You're still a little bit sleepy. And I think being tired is a little bit like being drunk in some ways, right? Your brain doesn't really filter out things quite as well as when it's active. When you're tired, your brain kind of just goes where it wants to go. And it's almost like you don't have much control over it. I don't know if you have that feeling too, but I think that's also a factor. So yeah, basically, I think all of these things come together for the perfect rumination environment. And I think there are many other areas besides getting in the shower where we do this. For some of us, it's meditating or getting into bed and trying to sleep, but that's when all these deep thoughts come to us. For some of us, it's a hobby. If you like to go running, you might have a lot of deep ruminations while you're running as well. Many different areas in life where we are free from distractions and all these other things start to flow into our heads, into our brains. But what I kind of mentioned before is, this is what I read online, that research shows that in these moments, our brains are not idle, which means they're not doing nothing. It's actually a really important part of the health of the brain, again, to process all this information and basically making sense of what we learnt and experienced earlier in the day. So it's a very useful thing. That's one reason I think why sleep is so important, because sleep plays a similar role in health and brain health. But yeah, I think that's just my little introduction, I suppose. And now maybe we can get into the first section. These are funny thoughts, funny shower thoughts. And most of these, maybe all of them, are ones that I found online, but kind of found them amusing. And I thought you might like them too. So here's an example of what I mean. The first one, I wonder if birds on my bird feeder are friends, or if it's like a public bathroom and no one makes eye contact. Right? So I love this idea of, very hard word now, anthropomorphizing. Ooh. Anthropomorphizing animals or objects. So maybe you can break this down. Morph in the middle means to change, to physically change, to morph. Morphize, eyes kind of means to make, something like that, like morphize, kind of make into something else, maybe. And anthra, the first part, is related to humans. So anthropomorphize is to make something seem like a human. Very long advanced word, but sometimes we can break it down and kind of guess the meaning based on the parts. So yeah, giving animals human characteristics can be quite funny, right? And I like this one because it's the same. So imagine you have a bird feeder in your garden. The birds come to eat their food, eat their seeds, and, are they all friends? They're having a meal together, they're enjoying their meal. Or maybe they're all total strangers. They don't know each other, and they're just kind of awkwardly eating the food, but trying to ignore the other birds. Like in a public bathroom where you pretend no one else is there. I don't know. Maybe they don't really think about it in those ways, but I like the idea that they do. I like the idea that they are feeling very awkward and, they just want to eat and get out of that place as soon as they can. But I don't know. What do you think? Well, I promise this won't be a bird-themed episode, but the next one is also about birds. And this is a different perspective. And also I like this one. So this is, birds probably think humans built power lines just so they can hang out together. Right? So power lines are the big electric wires, the cables that run across cities and countrysides. And, they often have flocks of birds who congregate, that means gather together, who congregate on the lines. The other day, in fact, I saw there was like 100 birds on this one power line, and it seemed like they were having a very important meeting. But yeah, this is a funny idea because to us, it's obvious that these are for transporting electricity, and we know that the birds are just using it to sit on, even though that's not its main purpose. But I find it kind of interesting, actually, that animals don't really have this sense of ownership. I don't know if animals, do you think animals have this sense of natural world versus man-made things? As a human, we can see, okay, this is a man-made building, this is a natural tree. That distinction is very clear. But do birds see that? Do animals see that? I'm not sure. I wonder if for birds, a power line is not so different from a tree. They just see it as two different shaped objects. Maybe. Maybe there's just more worms to eat near the tree. I don't know. But yeah, that's kind of interesting. And it's similar if you have a cat or a dog. I think especially a cat, you will know this is true, right? Cats don't have any respect for your possessions. They don't care what's yours. From a cat's point of view, everything is for them, right? If you buy a new phone, that's a toy for them. If you buy some earphones, like the ones I use, wired earphones, to you, that's for work or listening to music. But to the cat, it's just a toy to play with. So it's funny how animals don't have this sense of ownership. I don't know why that's a deep shower thought, but to me, it was kind of like, ooh, interesting. Do you kind of get what I'm trying to say? Maybe. Okay, let's move away from birds for a while. maybe just for a little bit. We've got a couple more slightly humorous ones here. This one I find kind of funny. This is when we clean something, we're just moving dirt from one place to a more acceptable place. So, again, I think some of you may not get this. Maybe it depends on the way your brain works. I'm not sure. Maybe some of you are too smart to find this interesting. But to me, I find it interesting. When I think of cleaning, I kind of think of removing the dirt. But of course, you can't really remove dirt. You're just moving it. You're moving dirt from the floor to a mop. it's not going anywhere. It's not disappearing. But this was one that I read online, but actually the one it made me think of was, for me, more interesting, and this is drying your body or drying the dishes. We like to think that, you're drying your body with a towel and the water is disappearing. But the water hasn't gone anywhere. The water is still in the room. If you think about what's happening, it's quite strange, maybe. You're basically moving the water from your skin onto a towel or into a towel, and then the water is just in the towel. It's still in the bathroom. And then I guess you just hang up the towel and you're waiting for the water to evaporate, leave the towel as a gas, I guess. Very weird, actually. You're just taking the water off yourself into another object. I don't know. To me, I never thought about it that way before. I just kind of did it and never even consciously thought about what was happening. So that's an interesting one. Okay, 3 more now. Let's do 3 more of this category. Get this one. It's impossible to buy a mirror that has not been used. You cannot buy a brand new mirror. Do you know why? Well, I think even if it's made in like a big factory, I think somewhere in the process of making a mirror, someone looks into it, maybe by accident, or maybe when they're testing the mirror for scratches and cracks. I think someone who is making the mirror is looking into it, even when they're delivering the mirror or, to the store, to the shop. I'm sure someone's looking in the mirror, right? So it's impossible to buy a mirror that has not been used. I guess if you're making mirrors, you can be the first one to look in it, but to buy it, I don't think it's possible. So yeah, that's a shame. Maybe next time you go out and buy a mirror, you should ask for a discount because it's secondhand. See if that works. If not, maybe they'll get a laugh out of it. Okay, the final 2 now. These are kind of like not super serious, but they're getting a bit deeper. So we're kind of easing our way. That means like slowly transitioning. We're easing our way into the deeper ones in a minute. So this is my own idea now. This is not one I found online. Every day, there is one person who is having the best day out of everyone in the whole world. And they probably don't even realize it. So I don't know why, but to me, this has always been interesting that, even in a world with over 8 billion people, there will always be one person who has the most, the best, the least, the highest, whatever superlative we want to use. There's one person who has that, right? If you think of it like a leaderboard, when you go to the arcade, there's a leaderboard, you get the high score. Someone has to have the high score, right? So, right now, right when we're talking, one person is number 1 on the leaderboard for being happy. Maybe they've just had a really good news or something like that, and they are super happy. But I don't think they know that they are number 1 in the world. They are literally the happiest person in the world. I mean, this works for everything, right? This probably works for every little situation you can think about. There's a person with the longest hair in the world. It's definitely not me. There's a person who is, I don't know, what could we say? There's a person who has spent the most time on a boat in the world. All these little kind of things that are very hard to measure, but someone is winning at all of these. And maybe it's changing minute to minute or hour to hour, but yeah, that's interesting to me. And another thing, do you think you have ever been number 1 at something? I'm sure we are all number 1 at many things, actually. Like, I am the number 1 person who lives in this area of the world who has an English podcast and is the same age as me and is called Michael. If you add all those things together, I'm sure I am the best person at doing that, right? But of course, that's maybe not too hard to beat. But yeah, I mean, do you think that you have ever been the happiest person in the world? Have you ever been the tiredest person, the most tired person in the world? have you ever laughed the most in the world at any moment? So many different questions here, but I don't know if any of these ideas or shower thoughts give you some of your own thoughts or feelings. Please share them in the comments. I'd love to hear if you have any more ideas or something interesting that you'd like to share related to these points. Okay, one more now, and yeah, this one is not exactly funny, but I mean, maybe it is from a certain point of view. I enjoy it as well. Your future self is probably judging your current self right now. So this might be a bit of a wake-up call for some of you, depending on what you're doing, but it's kind of funny to think about. I always like to think about myself as being, multiple. There's current me, there's future me, there's past me. In fact, there are many future me's, for different moments. And, sometimes you think back to the past and you think, oh, I was so stupid back then. What was I thinking? Why did I do that thing? And we don't often think in reverse. Right now, well, not right now, that doesn't make sense, but in the future, that future version of you is judging what you're doing right now. So, maybe that's a bit of a wake-up call to change your behavior and be better, right? So that could be a positive outcome. And yeah, maybe for me, I could say, 2 weeks ago when my podcast failed, I got very grumpy. And right now I'm judging that version of Michael. I was so impatient, perhaps. And what could I be doing right now that future Michael will be judging? Maybe I'll say, oh, I can't believe he made an episode on shower thoughts. What was he thinking? Such a silly idea. Why did he do that? Ugh, I can't believe he did that. Maybe, I don't know, or maybe he's actually thinking, oh, that was a good episode. Well done, Michael. Well done, past Michael. So I guess it could go either way, right? But yeah, okay, I think I'll leave that part there. Those are some slightly more light-hearted, some funny, maybe, let me know, shower thoughts, but let's get into some deep ones now. We'll see if I can finish them. I've got a list here, and some of them I'll try to talk, maybe I'll spend more time on than others, depending on how interesting I find them. But this one, maybe you've heard before. Is there any such thing as a truly selfless act? Or is altruism always secretly self-serving? So this word altruism basically is being totally unselfish, doing something to benefit and help other people. Altruistic is the adjective. So is there such thing as an altruistic action? And I honestly don't know, because, maybe you've heard this idea before. If you try to do something altruistically, selflessly, you often feel good about it, right? You give money to a homeless person and you feel happy about it. If you didn't feel happy about it, why would you give them money? That's kind of the slightly negative argument against a selfless act, right? And, maybe you can say, you know what, Michael, I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to give all my money to this charity, and it's going to be really painful because I don't have much money. And after I give the money, I will feel so miserable. But I could argue that you're doing that to prove me wrong. So you want to prove me wrong. That's why you're giving away all your money. So it's still kind of benefiting you in some way because you will feel good about proving me wrong. I don't know, but let me know what you think. Is it possible to be totally selfless and do something to benefit other people even when you receive zero benefit, or maybe the opposite? Maybe it doesn't even matter. Maybe it's not even that important that we can benefit ourselves and other people. It doesn't have to be one or the other. But yeah, that's a kind of deep shower thought that maybe you have considered before as well. Okay, next one is one that a lot of people might hate, because a lot of people are quite uncomfortable with this idea, and I don't really care, I suppose. But anyway, if you've seen the Matrix movies, this will be more clear for you. But this is, are we living in a simulation? Is everything we see actually kind of like a computer game? It's not real. And at first, the first reaction is, of course, not. I can touch the table, I can experience and taste the world, but it's actually harder to prove than, well, maybe impossible to prove. It's harder to prove than you might think. So I think the idea behind this simulation theory is in the future, it's going to get easier and easier to make simulations of life. And there are many reasons why you might want to do this. As I said, it could be a video game. It could be to test certain things. Just like when I'm making my website, if I want to test something new, I will do it on a fake website before I publish it on the main website. And maybe the same in the future, they want to make some change in the world, but they're not sure what the effects will be. So they simulate the changes on a computer before they do it in the real world. And, of course, video games and simulations, they're getting better all the time. But imagine in the future, 100 years, 1,000 years, how good could they be? How realistic will they look? I think it's plausible that simulations will be almost identical to real life, right? They will look the same. There'll be little things, like kind of wires connected to your brain that make you feel like you're touching something or tasting or smelling something. So how do you know if you're in a simulation or not? And I think the main idea behind this theory is there is only one real world, presumably. There's only one world that is real. But there can be an infinite number of simulations. So therefore, it's more likely that we are in a simulation. And I think this theory goes a lot deeper. There's lots of weird things that happen, like deja vu, that suggest we're in a simulation. That was another part of the Matrix movie as well. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's really interesting to think about. I love the idea. I personally don't believe that we are, even though life can get very strange. I don't think it's a simulation. But again, I have no evidence for that. It's just, I suppose, I don't want to think it's true, therefore I don't think it's true. And also, maybe it's not super useful. Believing this or not, maybe it doesn't really benefit your life. So it's fun to think about, but not a very useful thought experiment. Maybe. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. Hopefully I didn't worry you with that one. Okay, the next one, I think I'll mention this quite briefly. This is something I spoke about in a recent episode with Ray a few weeks ago, where we spoke about religion and spirituality. And Ray explained this really nicely. I know some people might struggle with his lovely Scottish accent, but if you can get past that, then I think you enjoyed that. But I'll try to explain it now, maybe in a lesser way. If the universe is really infinite, does that make every possible event inevitable? Right, so infinite means it goes forever. So lots of people believe that the universe goes forever. It never ends. You can think about that in terms of space. You can travel forever, or time. Even in billions of years, the universe will still be here. Maybe. Who knows? And inevitable means it will definitely happen. It's unavoidable. So this is something that I think just blows my mind. It's really difficult for my little brain to grasp, to get around this idea. But this is the idea that if things last forever, then everything will happen eventually, right? It's kind of like if you do something enough times, you will eventually succeed. Right? If you do something 1,000 times, it's possible that you will fail every time. Let's imagine throwing a dart, from a dartboard, game of darts, throwing a dart, what could be a very difficult dart throw? Throwing a dart from the top of the Empire State Building and landing it in, what is something that's small? Let's say landing it on a blade of grass, like one piece of grass, and cutting the grass in half. So perfectly landing it on that blade of grass so it cuts in half. That kind of seems impossible. Like even if you had 1,000,000 tries, you would probably fail every time, right? But what if you had infinite tries? If you never stopped doing it, then surely it would pass eventually, right? I think this is another thing with AI that people wonder about. Let's think of an AI software that can hack passwords, right? Passwords are very difficult to hack because there are trillions and trillions of possible combinations for a password. It's incredibly hard to guess. But if you have an AI system and they have all the time in the universe, they can just keep trying forever, they will eventually get your password, right? I think that's understandable. So does that mean if there is no end to time, that everything will eventually happen? Then maybe there'll be another Michael, just like me, who is born in the future, because everything can happen. I don't know. Really, really difficult to think about. I'm not sure if the human mind is big enough to really comprehend these problems. It seems like it's beyond our understanding, but yeah, interesting to talk about anyway, or think about. And I did say I would be brief on this one, and I wasn't. So sorry for being so long, but I hope you enjoyed it. I think we'll go to this one now. This is the idea of identity. Hopefully I'm not going through these too quickly. I'm kind of throwing a lot of these deep ideas at you, but I'm sure they're not new for you. But yeah, identity. Basically, this is, what does it mean to be you? This is something that I still just don't understand. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like, who am I? What does it mean to be Michael? And a lot of us will have this sense that our memories shape our identity. I am who I am today because of my past experiences. And the reason I remember those experiences is because I have the memories of what I did. But then what if you forget your memories? Are you not, am I not Michael anymore? Who are you after you lose your memory? And in fact, we are losing memories all the time. There are, I've just come back from a holiday. I'll maybe talk about that more next week. And I did many, many things in those 7 days, but do I remember every single thing? Not really. I might remember a few highlights and maybe even the low moments too, but I don't remember every single minute of the week. So what does that mean? If our memories don't remember everything, if our brains don't pick up everything, that's obviously shaping who we are as well. And if that's not true, if our memories don't make who we are, then who are we? I don't have an answer. It's just interesting to think about. Maybe it's just highlighting the fact that we're always changing. There is no constant Michael. There is no such thing as my character. It's always changing all the time. Maybe that's a better way to think about it. Okay, this one is another deep one on the idea of good and evil. One that I read online. And this is basically, is there such a thing as good and evil? Or are these just labels or ideas invented by societies to keep order? Right? Good and evil. Like, we might say, hurting someone is evil, being nice to someone is good. But what does that really mean? When you say evil, we basically mean that we don't like it. We don't like to see you doing that. But, of course, not everyone will agree. There are people like psychopaths who might not think it's evil. They might not care about certain actions. So it does seem to be like a societal agreement that people in a country or society agree that this is good and this is bad. But they're not always agreed upon by everyone, which is interesting. And the thing that I find really interesting, again, this comes back to animals, right? Can animals be evil? That's an interesting question. Can animals do bad things? Sometimes people treat their pets as if they are humans, and if they knock over a glass of water, they will punish the animal, which I don't personally agree with. And I think the misunderstanding here is that animals can do evil and wrong things. I'm not sure they can. Because to me, to do something evil requires the understanding that this will hurt other people, right? And I think as humans, we feel like we should know better. We shouldn't want to hurt other people. But when a lion kills a deer, we don't call that evil, right? We don't call it evil. That's just their nature. They do it because it's their nature to do it. They probably don't even think about the deer as an individual. Maybe. I'm only guessing, but I imagine, that they're not thinking this deer has thoughts and feelings just like me. I guess they're not thinking that way. I've seen this with cats as well. When a cat will chase a mouse, it's almost like that. It's just their instinct. They're not thinking, "Oh, let me get this mouse." That they see something running, and their instinct is to chase it. Right? That's why often when a mouse is not running, the cat will not chase it because it doesn't have that instinct in its brain that kicks on. But yeah, this is interesting, and I'm pretty sure this is true. Where it seems like as a society, our understanding of what evil has changed over time. I've seen there's a quite famous picture, I think, of an elephant being hanged. Very sad picture at a circus, because I think the story is the elephant got angry or got loose, and it basically trampled, which means stood on, one of the workers in the circus. So it killed a human, and the people wanted to punish the elephant, and they hanged the elephant with a rope as if it were a human, like a human execution. And I think to us now, this is a very weird idea, because when an animal kills a human, we don't get revenge on the animal. At least most people wouldn't think to do that. I think we have the understanding that the animal is just acting in its nature. It's not trying to hurt people. And if a bear attacks a human, we're not really mad at the bear. We're just sad that this happened. It's a little bit like a natural disaster. We kind of treat animals a bit more like an earthquake, right? We're not mad at the earth for doing that. And I think that's closer to being true. I don't think animals should be punished for this kind of stuff. Of course, there is some areas where, an animal that keeps coming into your village and killing everyone. Of course, something should be done about that. You can't let them do that. We need to protect ourselves as well. So in some cases, maybe that animal is humanely killed, maybe, or relocated. I'm not saying there are no examples of that. But yeah, interesting idea for sure. And it makes you wonder as well if our idea of evil and morality will change in the future as well. It's very easy to point at people and say, he is a good person, he is an evil person. But maybe it's not that simple, Maybe, again, I'm not saying this is true, so don't get mad, but it's just an idea that I've heard before in philosophy that maybe someone who does something that we call evil, maybe they are just acting in their nature, right? Some people, they do horrible, horrible things and they get arrested, they spend their life in prison. And, you can think about that. You ask a child, do you want to spend your life in prison? They're going to say no, right? So in that sense, it's almost like they are acting like an animal, right? They're not acting out of evil. It's just they have something in their brain that means they can't help but do it. Maybe. Again, I'm just kind of thinking out loud, but it's definitely interesting. It's kind of interesting to think maybe our current understanding of morality and justice, maybe it hasn't reached its final point. Maybe it's still going to evolve and change as we learn more. Or maybe not. I don't know. Let me know what you think about that. Quite a difficult idea to think about, but I found it quite interesting. It's the kind of thing that I would spend a long time stood in a hot shower mulling over. That kind of means ruminating again, mulling over. But okay. I think we'll just do one more actually, because the other one wasn't so interesting. So let's just do one more. This is one that I thought of before, and I quite like it. I think it's quite interesting. And it's a little bit of a mind-bending realization. And this is, you can't prove that you weren't born 2 seconds ago. Right? It sounds weird, but you can't prove it. So let's imagine, so we like to have this idea that I was born, 30 years ago, and in that time I've been to school, I got a job, I made lots of friends, I've got all these memories, and that's my life. But what if, let's just think about for a second, what if you were put on the planet, you just kind of appeared somehow 1 minute ago, just now, and all of your memories of the past, no matter how real they feel, were programmed into your head. I suppose, actually, this is a bit similar to The Matrix as well, maybe. It's not your real life. But yeah, all of my memories, I can't prove that they happened. I have photos, but they might be programmed as well. And my friends can also say they happened too. But I can't prove that my friends are real. What if my friends are all part of a computer program or something, or simulated? Again, it relates back to that previous one. So that's very weird to me. I can't prove it, right? I can look around at all my photos from the past and I can see them, but what if they didn't happen? There's no way of really knowing. And I hope I'm explaining it well enough, but it's very weird the more you think about it. Of course, I do want to mention, I don't believe that's true. Once again, I do think I was born, all those years ago. I don't think that I was put here a few minutes ago. But it is just interesting to think about. I suppose a lot of these, we can call them thought experiments, shower thoughts. A lot of them just make you think or question what reality is. We think we know so much about the world, and there's so much that we can't answer. And I don't think that's worrying. I just think it's interesting. There's a lot we can think about. Okay, I think I'll leave it there. I don't want to break your brains today too much. But let me know what you think about the points I've made. Maybe there's one that you liked the most, or maybe it also brought up some other ideas that you could share with me. Let me know your thoughts. Whew, that was a lot of talking I just did, but I think we'll get to a couple of reviews now. So I have 2 lovely reviews on Apple Podcasts. I always appreciate them. One of them was from Saudi Arabia, from Kulud. And they said, I like this podcast. I don't just learn English, I also learn new things about culture and life. That's a lovely one. Thank you very much. That's exactly my goal at the moment. I had one more from Japan, and this was an interesting one because I know who wrote this one. So this was basically a friend of mine. We met in Thailand maybe last year, and I didn't know that my friend listened to the podcast. They kind of listened to the podcast, and then we met later, and they've always been super supportive and super kind about the podcast. And they also told me they were going to leave this review, so I know it was them. So thank you very much if you're listening or watching to this one, but I'll read it here because it is very nicely written. This is definitely my favourite podcast. What sets him apart from other podcasters is that he has a wide variety of topics to talk about and honestly shares what he feels. It's like you're really talking to a friend. His voice and speaking speed are perfect, so you'll never get bored. I was already listening to his podcast every day when I was in Japan 3 years ago, but then I met him by chance in Thailand. He's super polite and kind, he's interested in a lot of things and is always learning. Thank you, Michael, as always. So that, super kind comment, really appreciate that one. Thank you very much. And not much more to say, but I do appreciate it. Okay, I think... I don't really have any updates for now. I suppose I can just quickly say, I meant to record this one before my trip, but I've just come back from a trip to Japan. Had a great time. I'm planning to talk about that more next week in a kind of more casual episode. We'll see how it goes. And I don't know. Maybe that's it. I just hope this one works well. So let me know if this episode succeeded for you. Let's just end with a quote then. This is from Anais Nin. And they said, "We don't see things as they are. We see them as we are." We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. It kind of relates back to a lot of the things we spoke about, right? That the way we see the world is shaped by our own eyes and minds, not how the world really is. Okay, I think we'll leave it here then. So thank you so much for listening today. I really hope you enjoyed this one. A little bit different, perhaps. But I'll see you next week for another episode. Goodbye. You have been listening to the Level Up English podcast. If you would like to leave a question to be answered on a future episode, then please go to levelupenglish.school/podcast. That's levelupenglish.school/podcast. And I'll answer your question on a future episode. Thanks for listening.